Hello. For tonight's Grizzly Tale, I'm going to read you a story from More Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. These are cautionary tales that I wrote for lovers of squeam. Tonight's story is called
The People Potter. The legend goes something like this. It was 1777. Mr. Josiah Reeks was a potter, the master figure maker at the world-famous Worcester pottery, a solitary, silent man who shunned the company of others and spent his life hunched over a potter's wheel in pursuit of perfection. Then one fateful day, a group of children kicked their pig's bladder through the window of the pottery's stockroom. The bladder smashed several precious porcelain china figures, and the children, in their clumsy attempts to retrieve their ball, smashed many more. Unfortunately, it was Josiah Reeks who stumbled across this scene of destruction. Unfortunately, it was his life's work that lay ruined on the floor. Unfortunately, the children had not escaped by the time he locked the door. Or so the legend goes. And when he re-emerged 3 days later, covered in dust and clay, there were 12 new figures in the storeroom, 12 life-size porcelain figures. All children, all with a glazed, far-away look in their eyes. They were potterified. They say that Josiah Reeks went into the stockroom sane, but came out as mad as blue biscuits. They say that he was bricked up in a tiny hot cell and died from the stifling heat as if toasted in a kiln. They say that for 200 years his ghost has potterified clumsy children all over the world. They say that you know when he's after you, because of the lingering smell of wet clay and the swish-swirling sound of his potter's wheel. They say that he's called the People Potter. But who's to say that they are right? Greta Gnaughty was a clumsy girl. She was nearly 2 meters tall and was still only 10. Her long arms and legs had a life of their own and flailed around her body like the tentacles of a skydiving octopus. When she walked into a classroom at school, the other children would cry, "Lawks, it's Gawks!" and would dive under their desks and cover their heads in case she knocked the blackboard off the wall, or slipped on a piece of chalk and flattened them with her whirling satchel as she windmilled through the window. In her time she had done both. For Greta, achieving the simplest of tasks was impossible without wholesale destruction of her immediate surroundings. When she went fishing with her father, she cast a hook through the car window, yanked off the handbrake, and sent the car rolling into the river. When she mailed a "Please tell me how to be a dainty daffodil" letter to the magazine Clumsy Lummocks, she got her hand stuck in the postbox. When she went shopping, she fell into the ice cream freezer and had to be pulled out by the king cones. She just didn't think. She saw what she wanted and went for it. "Hello, little dog," she said, bending down to pat the nervous Pekingese on the head. But it was less of a pat and more of a blow, and the little dog flew 10 meters up a tree, left its elderly owner dangling off a branch, and caused a stampede of squirrels through a sock shop. "It wasn't my fault," she protested. It never was. "It was an accident." Wrong again. She needed to leave things alone. She needed to stop prodding and pushing and nosing around like a rat in a sewer. She needed to look, not touch, to think before she acted, to put her brain into gear before she lifted a finger. But clumsy people never do. At home in Worcester, her poor parents lived in constant terror of what she'd break next, and they had good reason. In the hall, just behind the Wellington boots, was the family nest egg, a Ming vase worth £500,000. Mr. Gnaughty had found it in a skip. From the day she was born, it was made clear to clumsy Greta that she should never, ever touch this vase, and as a result, she grew up wondering if a magic genie lived inside. When she was 9, her curiosity got the better of her, and she tried to climb inside with a plate of toast for the genie's breakfast, but the vase toppled over. Had it not been for the fact that the sleeping dog broke the vase's fall, as well as 2 of its own ribs, it would surely have smashed. "It wasn't me," Greta lied to her parents. "It couldn't be me. You told me not to touch it." But they knew. Everyone knew. That night her parents smeared the vase with butter to stop their daughter getting a grip. Greta was so intent on seeing this genie, however, that she rigged up a hand mirror on a piece of string, stood on the landing and lowered it gently into the neck of the vase to see what she could see. Unfortunately, it was too dark to see anything, so she lowered a lit candle on a piece of string. But the flame burnt through the string, the lit candle fell into the vase heated up, the butter melted, and it cost £75 to have the carpet cleaned. "How could it possibly be my fault?" whined Greta, trying to argue the unarguable. "I was upstairs when the butter melted." The next day her parents caged their precious china vase in a padded wooden crate, which they stupidly thought would protect it forever. What they hadn't bargained on was Greta's shoelace working itself loose in the kitchen. When the ham-fisted girl bent down to tie it up again, she nudged the gas tap on the hob with her bottom, hit the ignition switch with her hand, and torched the crate to a cinder. "How was I to know you cooked on a flamethrower?" she protested. The next day the vase was hoisted off the ground in a cargo net. For a short while mid-air suspension seemed the perfect solution, until Greta decided to dance the dance of the sugar plum fairy while waiting for her bath to run. She had just pirouetted onto the loo seat when the water overflowed. As she executed a heavy pas de chat, she and 400 litres of water crashed through the ceiling like a waterfall. It took 6 firemen and 1 tub of axle grease to slide Greta out of the neck of the Ming vase, which had been very dark inside, and sadly lacked a genie. After the flood, her parents decided that they could not afford to take any more chances, so they lied to her. "If you break the Ming vase," her mother said sweetly, "we will all be ruined. Your father and I will be shipped off to a slave market in Marrakesh, and you will be sent to a big house on Clapham Common to start work as a celery maid." Greta's eyes nearly popped out of her head. "Is that like a scullery maid," she gasped, "who polishes skulls in a dungeon?" "No," lied her mother for a second time. "A celery maid is made to eat celery every meal for the rest of her life." "Oh, yuck!" spat the girl. "I hate celery." She ran around in circles to get the bad taste out of her mouth and knocked a paperweight off the bureau. It fell with a sickening splat onto the little house in the gerbil's cage. "Leave it," winced her mother. "We'll scrape that up later." But the Marrakesh celery lie had its effect. From that day on, Greta always took the greatest of care when she was in the presence of the precious Ming vase. Apart from that silly game of indoor golf, that trivial incident with the runaway motormower, and that memorable attempt to fly a kite in the hall with a hairdryer, the vase was never in danger again. Then one Friday evening, a parcel arrived for Greta. It was marked, "This way up, breakable." Her excited parents hopped around behind her chair and urged her to open it. "Do you know what it is?" Greta asked, as her fingers slipped off the knot and catapulted the spoon out of the mustard, splattering her father's wine with fiery yellow globs. She was quick to shift the blame. "Your fault for leaving the spoon in the jar," she said. "Just open the present," sighed her father, drinking his mustard wine and pulling a sour face. "We found it in an antique shop," her mother explained, as Greta peeled off the paper and revealed a faded green box. "The man in the shop said it would encourage you to take more care." "What's that noise?" said Greta suddenly, turning round to check the room. She couldn't pin down where it was coming from. "It's a sort of whirring noise, spinning, whooshing, swishing. There, listen!" But her parents could hear nothing. It was like a freewheeling bicycle, Greta thought, or someone sweeping leaves off a path. And there was a funny smell, too. What was it? Mud? "Open your present, Greta." Her father's voice sounded weary as he tugged his dreamy daughter back into the real world. When she removed the lid of the box, she found a tiny porcelain figure lying on a quilt of white tissue paper. "It's Worcester," said her mother. 1795, over 200 years old. "Do you like it?" Greta wasn't sure. It was a figure of a grey-haired man with jug ears, a pinched mouth, a receding chin, and a long nose that made him look like a china teapot. He was wearing a rather drab frock coat and was carrying under his arm a round silver tray. "Is he a waiter?" queried Greta. "No," smirked her father. "Look what he's standing on." It was a small hill made from lumps of clay, broken china, and children's toys. Greta didn't understand. "That's not a tray, Greta. That's a potter's wheel." Still nothing. "He's the people potter." "Oh," said Greta, as if she finally understood. "Who's he?" Greta's parents told her the legend of the pig's bladder, and she listened with open ears. "But why did he potterify the children?" she asked. "Well, to teach them a lesson," said her father. "They were clumsy, and china breaks." "Oh," said Greta, warily eyeing the porcelain figure. "I've never seen anything like it." "That's because it's the only one in the whole world," said her mother. "Why didn't they make more?" "Because it wasn't made. It just appeared in the Worcester factory one day. Look." Her father took the figurine out of the box and turned it upside down. On the base there was a crude poem. "Do not break me, pass me on to a clumsy miner. Let them know that if I smash, I'm coming back from China." "What does that mean?" Greta gasped. "Well, nobody's quite sure," said her mother, "but the man in the shop said that you should look after it, and under no circumstances let it smash." "Or what?" "Well, or the people potter will come back from China." Her mother and father roared with laughter. "We don't know, Greta. Stop looking so serious. It's only a bit of nonsense. We thought it might make you more careful, that's all." "Got you," said Greta. "Thanks." Far from making her more careful, however, the presence of the porcelain people potter made Greta more and more nervous, and the worst thing you can do to a clumsy person is to make them nervous, because nerves are to clumsiness what firelighters are to barbecues. Instead of becoming less clumsy, she became more clumsy. She stood up to get the milk from the fridge, forgetting that she tucked the tablecloth into her collar because she didn't have a napkin. "Oh, whoops!" She cleared the table in one clean sweep, stippling the walls with marmalade, filling the lampshade with tea, and creating a sandy beach effect on the floor with the sugar. She took one look at the ugly, glowering porcelain figure on the kitchen table and ran wailing from the room. As she screeched into the hall, however, she caught her cardigan on the door handle and tore off a button. But she wasn't stopping for anything, not even the swish-swirling noise in her head. She raced upstairs, broke 3 stair rods with her thumping feet, unravelled a wrinkle of stair carpet, and dived into her bedroom. Her parents took one look at the mess in the kitchen, took one look at each other, and shouted, "Greta! We're going out! We'll be back in 2 hours, by which time we expect you to have tidied up the house." Then they stroked their beloved Ming vase and left, shutting the door behind them. As they did so, Greta's button rolled across the hallway, bumped into the 15th century vase, and spun to a standstill on the floor. Through cold, glassy eyes, the porcelain figure of the people potter saw it all. Greta stood up from her bed and wiped her runny nose with the corner of her cardigan. That was when she noticed the missing button. Oh, horror! Her grandmother had knitted that cardigan and was visiting tomorrow. The people potter was slung from her mind. The button had to be found. She dashed out of her room and switched off the light as she went. What she didn't know was that her flood of nervous tears had collected in a puddle on the floor, and that the puddle had dripped through the boards onto a frayed electrical wire. When she flicked the light switch, the wires shorted out, and a spark set fire to her rug. Meanwhile, galloping down the stairs, Greta was doing her usual trick of not looking where she was going. Her foot slipped on the loose carpet that she'd rucked up minutes before, and her legs shot out either side of the banisters. "Ow! Oh! Ah! Oh! Ah! Oh! Ah!" She bumped down the stairs on her bottom, snapping posts in half and spraying splinters to either side like a snowplough clearing snow. She hit the newel post at speed, uprooted it from the floor, and somersaulted onto the lampshade hanging from the hall ceiling. The light was not designed to take her weight. The flex snapped, and Greta crashed through the hall floor into the cellar, where she accidentally fell on top of the pipe that pumped mains water into the house. With a rumble and roar, a water fountain burst through the fracture, and Greta shot up in the air like a beach ball on a geyser, straight back through the hole she'd just made in the floor, and up through the ceiling into the bathroom. As she passed through the hall, she caught a glimpse of the Ming vase sitting precariously in the middle of this devastation. She squeaked, as if a little squirrel had just punched her in the stomach. She had to save the vase. She grabbed onto the bath tap and tried to pull herself down off the water spout, but the pipes that fed these taps ran up towards the tank in the loft, and she pulled with such force that the pipes ripped out of the wall, the ceiling collapsed, and the contents of the loft crashed down into the bath. No bath is designed to support that much weight. With a shuddering clang, it plummeted into the hall, bounced off the hat stand, and crashed through the wall into the sitting room. It came to a halt with its clawed feet wedged firmly in the torn sofa covers. Greta had hitched a ride, and now she climbed out across the coffee table, which collapsed under her weight and fired a bowl of flowers at the CD player, which fell to the ground and switched itself on, playing that old-time classic, "Fly Me to the Moon." Greta crawled into the hall to check on the Ming vase, but, and this is where it starts to get bizarre, it was at that precise moment that the fire in her bedroom set off the fire alarm. This had 3 effects. 1, the high-pitched wailing increased Greta's sense of panic. 2, a neighbour heard the noise and called the fire brigade. 3, the driver of the mole, which was a huge drilling machine that Worcester City Council was using to dig Worcester's first underground railway system, heard what he thought was the lunch break siren, and hungry for his cheese and pickle sandwich, he started to turn his machine around. Only that was also when the steering wheel locked and the throttle jammed. "It can't happen," the manufacturers told the council when they bought the drill. But it had. The driver jumped ship and left the runaway mole drilling upwards at 1 metre per second, and as you've probably guessed, the only object between it and heaven was Greta's house. Greta was back in the hall, clambering over the rubble to reach the precious Ming vase, when she suddenly remembered the porcelain figure of the people potter. Horror! She had to save that too! But as she turned towards the kitchen, 2 hard jets of water knocked her off her feet. It was the fire brigade, and just as well they turned up when they did, because all of a sudden the moles screeched through the cellar. The roof shuddered, and the walls started to buckle and fold inwards like a house of cards. As luck would have it, that was when the CD jammed and played the first 5 notes of Fly Me to the Moon in a loud, repetitive cycle. Well, a spacecraft must have picked up the signal, as they do, and the alien captain must have thought it was another spacecraft in trouble. Whatever the reason, one moment Greta was in mortal danger, pinned to the ground by a man-mincing monster mole machine. The next, she was safely suspended in a beam of light that was shining from the bottom of an alien spacecraft. Then, as the mole churned its way harmlessly through the back garden, Greta was lowered into the rubble next to the Ming vase, and the alien blasted back into space. Its rockets ignited with a mighty roar and blew the roof of Greta's house off. Not that she noticed, because just then she found the missing button. And more importantly, there wasn't a scratch on it. Her grandmother would be pleased. Suddenly, the house groaned. It was a low, mournful sound, like a wild sea wind whistling through rigging. It was the sound of wood being torn apart, of metal twisting, of nails pinging out of buckled joints. Then the house collapsed. Greta was lucky to escape with her life. She was lucky to escape with the Ming vase intact too. When she opened her eyes, only 2 things were left standing: the precious vase and the front door. There was a knock from the outside, but Greta did not answer. Her desperate eyes were searching for the porcelain figure of the people potter. The kitchen table had been smashed into firewood. She couldn't see it. There was a second knock on the door. It was more impatient. "Look, Greta, look!" And then she saw it, lying behind a fallen beam in 1,000 shattered pieces. She gasped with cold horror. What had the poem said? "Do not break me, pass me on to a clumsy miner. Let them know that if I smash, I'm coming back from China." The front door swung open of its own accord, shifting the debris behind it. "It wasn't my fault, it was an accident," cried Greta, gawping at the grey-haired man with a beaky face like a teapot. "Who's a clumsy clod?" said the people potter. "Go away!" squeaked the girl, realising at once what the poem meant. Coming back from China meant coming back from the dead. And this spook was not about to go away, not after he'd spent 200 years waiting to arrive. Besides, he had work to do, which was why he'd bought his potter's wheel. When Greta's parents returned home after their walk, their home had gone, and their clumsy daughter had been turned into a life-size porcelain figure with a glazed, faraway look in her eyes. "She's been potterified by the people potter," gasped her mother. "How's the Ming vase?" "Fine," said her catatonic father. "Not a scratch on it." Clumsy Greta was now as fragile as the Ming vase. She couldn't clump, she couldn't gawk, she couldn't lumber. In fact, she couldn't even blink for fear of breaking herself. She became so quiet and careful that people often mistook her for a real statue. Just remember, the potter's wheel is always spinning.